Hey guys, my name is Troy, and welcome to this first installment of All Around Sound Theory. Um, if you'd like a little bit of background about me, check out my YouTube page. You can find me at troyanthonysmall.com, and you can find out a little bit more of my musical background. Just a quick intro, I am a performer. I have performed, I'm a vocal performer. I have performed opera, pop, jazz, many other genres, oratorio, classical and non-classical, and have also taught privately voice, piano, and music theory for years, for over a decade, and have been singing professionally for over a decade as well. Um, I am degreed in voice performance, as you can see back there if I get to proudly display. And the piano's hot, of course. But outside of that, or in addition to that, I should say, there are other things that I do musically as well. Lecture, write. I'm very much into education as well as um, performance and outreach. I definitely feel we as musicians, when you get to a certain tier of musicianship, you you have a kind of obligation to help educate those who have a desire to learn the industry, not just the music business industry, but performance practice and other things. So my purpose in doing all this and developing all around sound is to help anyone who is interested in music to establish a vocabulary. There are certain terms that we say, um, like notes and pitch, that some folks think are interchangeable. They are not interchangeable, and particularly with the notes and the pitch, that's one of my things that I'm going to be a stickler about. But I will hopefully enlighten people on the difference between things like that. And so, if you ever have questions, please feel free to send me a message, subscribe to the YouTube page, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So let me just go ahead and start, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So let's get started with the first episode, or installment, whatever you want to call it, of All Around Sound. And as I said, we're going to be establishing a vocabulary. So every episode that we have, every installment that we have, we will have some applicable vocabulary. All right? So in this one, we're going to start small. As we progress, they may get a little bit more intense, just so you know. So the first one we're going to take a look at, the first word we're going to see is tone. The second term we're going to study is pitch. Then we are going to focus on frequency. And finally, the measurement of frequency, hertz, and why we call it hertz. So one question that I get a lot from people, or musicians may get a lot, is what is music? Now, this is an arguable question with many different answers, but my answer is music is a collection of a sound or sounds, okay? Now, I'm going to give some other specific, or some other people's opinions on what they think music is. And starting with this one, music is concerned with sound, but only some sounds. Some sounds are very heavy and deep, others are light and high. All sounds are caused by something vibrating, that is a small, to and fro movement. So all sounds are caused by a vibration, a small to and fro movement. Sometimes the movement is so fast that we cannot hear it. A very high sound, for instance, like a dog whistle. If we hear a very low note on an organ, sometimes we can actually feel the floor moving. How cool is that? Okay. We call the height or depth of a sound its pitch. Again, we call the height or depth of a sound its pitch. So now let me go into Reblitz's definition of how he differentiates musical tone versus noise. I love this definition. Okay. When something vibrates, it causes the surrounding air to imitate its movement. For example, when the surf pounds on the shore, the movement of the water transmits its scrambled collection of vibrations to the surrounding air. In turn, the air makes our eardrums vibrate. Now, continuing on. On the other hand, when an object vibrates at a certain speed and causes your eardrum to vibrate at the same speed, we hear musical tone if the vibration is within the range of human hearing. If the vibration is too slow, we hear each cycle individually like the clicks of a ratchet or the pounding of a jackhammer. If the rate is too fast, we can't hear it at all. So going forward, I'm going to mention a system that we're going to be using when we talk about theory. We're talking about the equal temperament series. The equal temperament system is what we're talking about in music theory. And let me just give a couple definitions here. In music, equal temperament is a tuning system to which the octave is divided into 12 semitones of equal size. One other definition. The octave is divided into 12 exact equal semitones so that an instrument sounds equally in tune in any one of the 12 keys. So let me stop for a moment and transition over here, and we're going to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so now you have a little bit of a view of my keyboard. I'm going to put my mic up here so I can use my hands on my piano. All right. So what they're saying is they're talking about the equal temperament system, and they're talking about how it's divided into octaves. So I want you to just notice before we go any further, let me just adjust this right here. Before we go any further, I want you to notice the layout of the piano. Okay, now you'll see I have two here. Now let me differentiate for a second. A standard piano, a standard full piano has 88 of what we call keys, these black and white things here. Now, when I talk about piano keys, they are not synonymous with musical keys like pitches and things like that. All right? Hang on one second. Let's transition. All right. So when I talk about piano keys, we're not talking about musical keys like key signatures and things like that. We will get to that in, I think, about the third or fourth lesson. We're going to talk about tetrachords, scales, keys, and chords and things like that. And it's going to get really deep. But in terms of piano keys, let me not lose my train of thought. If I do, bear with me, as I will sometimes, because theory can send you off on several tangents. Let me bring it back right now. So we're talking about piano keys. Here you have 88 keys. Any standard piano is going to have 88 keys, black and white keys, 88 keys. This one has a little bit less. This has 61 keys. It's missing two of what we call octaves. They're missing two octaves. So it's missing the top octave, the seventh octave, and it's missing the first octave and the three keys below it. Okay. Let's talk about the layout of the piano for a little bit. You'll notice that there are black keys and patterns of twos, threes, twos, threes, twos, threes, so on and so forth, right? All the way up the piano. Okay. Notice that at the very beginning there is one. There's a single, right? So like 1, 2, 3. This one key is actually the third of three. Notice how they're all the same tone. They're all the same tone. These are all what we call B flats or A sharps when we talk about enharmonic spelling. We'll talk about enharmonics a little bit later, but let me just define it right now. An enharmonic spelling, when something is enharmonic, it has two names. So what do I mean by that? So how I just call this a B flat, it can also be called an A sharp. That is what we mean by enharmonic spellings. F sharp can be called a G flat as well. But anyway, first I should tell you how to recognize the keys, how to recognize the notes, how to recognize the names. So, how about we start with what the names are? Let's transition back. All right. So now continuing on, let us differentiate tone from pitch. So now the definition, Randall's definition of tone is a sound of a definite pitch. I do like Miller's as well, a sound played or sung at a specific pitch. Finally, any sound with reference to its quality, pitch, strength, source, etc. And so take a look and you'll notice that there are 7 letters here, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those 7 letters are what we refer to as the musical alphabet, or we call them pitch classes. So what does that mean? We identify tones and pitches with our letter names, A through G. Okay? And even though there are 88 keys on a piano, 61 keys on a piano, sometimes there's 49, sometimes there's 76, the letter names will always repeat. So moving on. Every tone we sing or play has a specific scientific value. When measured scientifically, the value used is called its pitch. Once again, we call the height or depth of a sound its pitch. Remember that from earlier? So, going back to pitch class and differentiating pitch from tone, let's go back just a second. Notice there's the musical alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, okay? But if you look at the piano, let's transition back. I want you to look at the piano. We said there's 7 letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But I've said there's 88 keys, so what happens? Once you get to that 7th, G, oh my God, guess what happens? It repeats, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That is poor fingering on my part. Please do not judge me if you're a pianist. Trust me, I know better. But anyway, pitches, tones repeat, tone names repeat. Because even though that first one is an A, and you have another A and another, even though these are the same tone, being that they're all A's, they are not the same pitch because they have different frequencies. We'll get there in just a second. So let's get to the identification on the piano. I'm going to reattach my mic real quick. Okay, so, whoops. Identifying on the mic, on the piano, we said the first key, the very first key on the piano, next to that 1 is a letter A. So once again, above that is going to be B, above that, C. Now I want you to notice where the C is. Notice the 2 black keys here. Directly to the left is a C of any 2 black keys. So here's the next 2 black keys. Directly to the left. Next 2, directly to the left. Next 2, there you go. Now, I want you to pay attention to this C right here. This is the 4th C on the piano. So, going back to the beginning of Equal Temperament, they talked about the 12 pitches, the 12 tones within an octave. So, let's start from C. So you have, if you count the first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Then it repeats to another C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Those 12 pitches compile what we call an octave. So from C to C is an octave. From that C on top to the next C is also an octave. C to C, an octave. C to C, an octave. 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 An octave is what we refer to as an interval. We're not going to talk about intervals in this lesson, but trust me, we're going to get to them. I think we're going to get to intervals in lesson 2, so stick around. All right? So now you see the layout of the octave system. Now, let's go a little bit deeper in there. There are two systems, two international systems that we use to designate octaves. This is how we differentiate the tones and the pitches. So let's stick with C for a second. Someone once said that C major is the people's key. C is the people's key, and I love that. So, because a lot of times when you're starting, you're going to start with C. You'll figure out why later, or I'll tell you why later. So, we'll say C to C is an octave, right? So, on that first C, that very first C on the piano, we call that C1. Okay? The C above that, an octave higher, we call C2. Guess what we call the one an octave above C2? If you said C3, you're right. All right? Above that, C4. Keep C4 in mind for a second. We're going to come back to C4. An octave above C4, C5, octave above that, C6, octave above that, C7, an octave above that, which happens to be the last key on an 88-key piano, C8. There are 8 C's on a piano, on a standard piano. My 61 key does not have 8. I think it has 6. If it's missing 2 octaves, it should be 6. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, he knows math. And no, that's not on right now. But anyway, so you have the layout and the octave designations. So that's C1, C2, C3, C4. Middle C is very important because when you're at a piano, that is where you have to position yourself as a piano. As a piano player, you want to be able to position yourself in a way where you are able to extend and move with the piano. Now, I'm just going to throw myself under the bus and say that I'm on a wheelie chair right now, which you typically wouldn't do with piano, but for purposes of moving from the keyboard to my computer, we're using a chair with wheels. But, yeah, so anyway, throw myself under the bus again. But use your octave designations. C4, middle C, is where your body needs to be positioned, best positioned in the piano. Your belly button should be right around C4, D4. So right around here is your best position when you're playing piano. Piano is my instrument of choice, particularly because it is a C instrument, as we say. You may not know about instrument tunings and things like that. There are certain instruments that are written as C but sound B flat, E flat, and F. If we're going into orchestral instruments such as the French horn, the B flat clarinet, there's an A flat clarinet, but here's one of those tangents I talked about, so we're going to pull it back. Anyway, your position on the piano should be by middle C and the D above it. So C4, D4. Now let's get back to octave designations, and then we're going to move on, okay? See, this is one of those tangents I warned you about. All right. So we said the first C on the piano is C1. So the D above that would be D1, E1, F1, G1, A1, B1, C1, or excuse me, C2. There we go. Again, please don't judge me for my bad fingering. All right. So then you have C2. Guess what the D is going to be above it? D2, E2, F2, G2, A2, B2, C3. All right? Octave designations change on C3. So let me go back and say something else. I mentioned that there are 2 octave designation systems. What we're using is the US system, where middle C is C4. There is an older system called the Helmholtz system, which is typically used by other countries around the world. I'm not sure if there may. I'm sure there are certain institutions which may use a U.S. system. But in the Helmholtz system, what's interesting is middle C is not C4; it's actually C1. And as you go lower, it becomes a kind of a grand C instead of. This is C1, but then you have like a capital C or grand, and then you have a contra and a subcontra octave. But it's interesting because it flips or it shifts the octave designation. So if middle C is C1 in Helmholtz, then the C above it becomes C2. We are not using the Helmholtz system. I do not use the Helmholtz system. I am not against anyone who is. I'm just not going to do it because I think it's a lot simpler to say the first C on the piano is C1. And that's kind of how I was trained, so that's what I'm going to stick with. But there is merit to other systems, not to throw anything away like that or anything like that. So now to wrap it all up, we're talking about U.S. octave designations. First C on the piano is C1. Well, you have 3 keys below it, right? You have an A sharp or B flat. Remember the enharmonic spelling, 2 names. And you have a B natural, okay? Guess what? These are 0 octaves. Since the first C is C1, that B is a B0, A sharp, B flat, 0, A0. Okay? Now you know how to designate octaves. The difference between a tone and a pitch is where it lies in frequency. So guess what? We're moving to frequency. We're transitioning back, ladies and gentlemen. Hang on a second. All right, now, so let's talk about frequency. So, this great definition of frequency: the number of complete vibrations or cycles occurring per unit of time, usually per second. Frequency is the primary determinant of the listener's perception of pitch. I'm going to say that one more time. Frequency is the primary determinant of the listener's perception of pitch. Follow me on this for a little bit. So we talked about the several A's and octaves that are on the keyboard. We talked about the C's. Let's talk about A for a second. So as I said, the first pitch on the piano, let me transition here. How about we do this for a second so you have a better view. Let's see. Whoa. We want to do this. All right, friends. So we said the first note on the piano is A0, right? Okay. So what that means is the A0, you'll see the 28 Hz below it. That's the hertz. It's the unit of measurement we'll get to in a little bit. But what that means is to hear that A0 pitch, there are 28 cycles per second that happen. So what does that mean? In every second that you hear that, there are 28 waves, 28 cycles that produce that sound. An octave above that, and the frequency is doubled. So keep in mind, let me just say that these are approximations in terms of frequencies, because some of these are very specific in terms of decimal points, but these are rounded, I think, to the nearest thousandth, if I'm not mistaken. So bear with me on this. Okay, so we said A0 is 28 hertz. A1, an octave above that, is 55 hertz. Notice how that's double. A2, 110 hertz. A3, an octave above that, 220 hertz. A4, an octave above that, 440 hertz. So that means 440 times a second. 440 cycles happen every second when you hear that pitch. 440 waves. Anytime a singer sings that, 440 times those vocal folds are fluttering. All right? Now, you'll notice I've highlighted the A4, the 440. I've done that purposely because A440 is the equivalent of our tuning system. Let me explain for just a little bit. There are different systems of tuning. There are, in the past, or maybe even still today, there were people who tuned that A to 435 hertz. So a little bit less, a few cycles less per second. Well, that changes the pitch. That completely changes the pitch, so it's not the same sound. But in equal temperament, in Western classical music, what we are focused on is A4 equaling 440 hertz. This is why you hear orchestras tuning to this pitch. When you hear orchestras Tuning, this is the pitch that they play. This is what they tune to, A4, 440 hertz. This is the tuning system that is used in equal temperament. So that A440 is very important. Moving on. So now we're talking about hertz, right? Hertz, a measure of frequency equal to 1 cycle per second and named after German physicist Heinrich Hertz. Notice the frequency on C's now. So that first C is actually 33 hertz. That second C, C2, 65, C3, 131 hertz. Middle C, 262 hertz. An octave above that, 523 hertz. So see how that's doubling? And there's that picture of the late Heinrich Hertz. Now to wrap it all up, I love Reblitz's definition of frequency. So check this out. The speed at which the object vibrates is its frequency, measured in cycles per second, or hertz. As the object vibrates faster, its frequency is higher, and we hear a higher tone. The frequency of vibration in hertz is also called pitch. The faster the vibration, the higher the pitch. Once again, the faster the vibration, the higher the pitch. Here's a bibliography of some of the books that I've used. I still use and will probably use till the day I die. These are great resources. Join me again for the second episode. We're going to get a little bit more in depth. I'm going to talk to you about how to notate music, how we write music, and hopefully it'll be a good time. Thanks for joining.